My first year of turning, I was so excited about turning. I just said, I have to get good enough so I can start teaching and sharing the word of wood turning art. And so I teach at 3 different locations. First place is my shop. The other one is Woodcraft in Rancho Cordova. The other place is the Curious Forge in Nevada City. Today's class outline is we're going to talk about harvesting and drying and sealing the logs, finding the blanks in the logs. We're going to talk a little bit about bandsaw and some considerations if you haven't purchased one. The use of CA glue, mounting and turning the blank, and the use of jam chucks to finish the bottom of the bowl. So if we're ready to go, we'll just start turning. All right. So the first thing I need to do, you see the blank here, and it looks a little bit off center. Well, actually, let me switch gears. Let me go to a couple of still photos so we can talk about some of the harvesting and drying of the wood.
Okay.
Okay, my
share screen, we are coming up.
So you can go to the second one, it's great. Okay. Well, that's me, Carlos. Okay, now the second slide, that's our goal, is to do a natural edge bowl. Now, you've seen a lot of different natural edge bowls. Some people say with the bark, some say without the bark, some say you don't match the wings. But at John C. Campbell Folk School, when I was taught, I like this design. When you match the wings, it just looks nicer when it sits on the table. Next slide, please.
Oops. We'll get there.
All right. All right. So one of the goals is when you look down the center of the bowl, the heartwood should be right in the center. This way it draws your eyes to the center of the bowl and everything looks nice and symmetrical, and it's just a really nice thing to look at. This does take experience and practice when you're chainsawing the wood, so some bowls come out perfectly and others do not. But with a little bit of practice, you can get it this way also. The next slide shows, this is my, this is a horseshoe that I use I set the logs on there and I cut them up. I glued everything up so if I happen to cut through the 2x4s, I'm not going to ruin my chainsaw by going through a screw. All right, next. So once you have the logs, you need to say, well, how do I find the bowl blanks? So in this example, there's a dark line in this close to the center. The left side, you can see that it's already chipped and cracked, and the pith is on that side. So with this log, I would cut it right on the line and use the blank on the right-hand side. Now, in the beginning, I would try and use every log just because I wanted to be frugal, but when you're doing natural edge bowls, you need to find the best possible piece out of that one log, even if you have to waste the majority of it. The next slide shows some more examples. So this shows a larger log. This is about an 18-inch diameter log, and it shows me cutting the pith out, and you have a bowl blank on the right and left side. This is one of the ideal things to do so that you cut the pith out, and that's where you have problems with chipping, cracking when it dries. Because as the pith, it just creates a lot of things. So if your log is large enough, you want to cut it out for sure. Yeah, excellent. Now this one, you can see there's 3 bowl blanks out of this. Part of the reason for doing this is each bowl has a different grain orientation. So on the previous slide, your grain is going to go into one direction. When you cut 3 bowls out of a log, the grain changes. So you can have the same wood and have each bowl look different with the grain orientation, which really is nice. I do a lot of oak, and it's really fun to find out how you can change the grain orientation, how the bowls look with the same type of wood. Now this one shows someone's really gotten aggressive with this. They want to use every single piece. But the reason I put this in there was it gives you an example of, am I doing a platter? Am I doing a vase? Am I doing a hollow form? What project do I want to get out of this particular log? And with all the drawings, you couldn't get all the pieces out of it because you got the chainsaw thickness and everything else. But this just shows an example. You want to be specific grain on your product, on your project. You can find it doing it this way. I think we have one more. Okay, so here's another different orientation as you cut the log to do a hollow form. So you can see how the log is standing on its bark and you're cutting it out. So this works really well for hollow forms, and just because it makes the grain really pop when it's going around the outside rim of the bowl and as it tapers either upward or downward. Okay. Now the other thing with harvesting and drying wood, the larger the log, the better it is. So if you don't have time to cut it up into blanks, leave it large, coat the ends with some kind of wood sealer, and you'll be fine in a few months. And then as you're going to cut your blanks, you want to make sure to cut at least an inch or two off each end so you can see where the chips and cracks are. This way you can find out how to draw out your blanks and really get a nice piece of wood. Let's see, I think. Okay. Now, bandsaw considerations. Now, this is my bandsaw. As you can tell by the measurements, if I have a larger than a 6-inch log, I'm not going to fit on that bandsaw. So, in the beginning, I got logs to fit my bandsaw. But now what I do is I just chainsaw the corners and I do the biggest logs I can find. I think it's more fun doing the larger logs. So bandsaw consideration, I think I have the next one that just shows a little more closer. So if you haven't purchased one, this is a big consideration if you do large work or if you're planning on doing large. I wasn't planning on it, but as time progresses, your blanks get bigger and it's more fun.
Can I add something?
Yes.
One of the things, in the 14-inch, that's a 14-inch Rockwell, right?
Yes.
Delta used to make a riser kit for those. They no longer do. Occasionally you might find one on Craigslist, but in fact, you can order the one from Grizzly, and reportedly it will work okay. The pins aren't in the right spot, but by removing the pins where they connect, it should work fine. And when you do that, then you get a 12-inch or 13-inch lift on it, and that's very helpful.
Yep, exactly. All right. Okay, that's the next slide, please. All right, so you have your log, you cut it in half, and now you bring it to the bandsaw. So I use this method. I have a cardboard cutouts, and I put a nail or a screw in there, however it fits. And so I just cut the rounds out with the bandsaw. Now, if it's really green wood, at this point, I will put CE glue around the bark, and I will seal it with a wood green sealer, date the bottom of it, and let it dry for as many months as it needs. Okay, next. So this is after, so on the top, you see I cut a 1-inch hole through the bark to the hardwood so that my spur drive has, you don't want bark, the spur drive won't hold with bark, so you have to drill down enough to get to the wood so you have a good hold on the spur drive. Okay. So this is an example. This is a 6-inch bowl or piece of wood. Now, with smaller trees, it's really, if I would cut this in half and cut the pith out, you won't get much of a bowl. But this shows that you can put it on the lathe, cut the bottom out, and still get a nice little bowl. The next slide will show just a little different orientation of what the log looks like and what the bowl would look like. The pith is in there, but I found that with 6-inch oak, 6 to 8 inches, sometimes it dries just perfectly. So this is an 18-month-old piece of wood, and it hasn't split yet. So I've been lucky. All righty. So the next thing for storing and harvesting, so this is a bowl blank that's 10 inches in diameter, and I've cut out 10%, excuse me, I left 10% of the bowl so that it will dry faster. So it depends on how much of a hurry you are. So you have a large log, cut into smaller pieces, rough turn it, and seal it, and hopefully this will dry and the bark will pop off. And so this is about a year old, so it's doing just fine, and I should be turning this anytime. Okay.
I got ahead of you. There you go.
Okay. And this is where we're at now, and so I'm going to chuck up this piece, and we'll start turning. All right.
All right, so we can leave.
Okay.
Oh, you got another one on here. Did you want this one too?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Oh, you talk about it. Okay. Well, while Bill is
Fiddling.
fiddling with the camera, doing a fine job, I'd like to thank him for the use of his shop, because I couldn't have pulled this off. My shop's large enough, but with all the camera, you got to hand it to him. He's done a fantastic job. First time I came in here, I thought I was in a movie studio. So, nice job. Thank you, Bill.
All right.
All righty. So,
All right. Oh, there we go. Okay.
okay. So this piece, this is 8 inches in diameter, and it's on the lathe, but it's not quite ready to turn. And the reason, you can kind of see that one wing is higher than the other. So this is the point where you want to line up the wings. If you don't do it this way, the wings won't be lined up when it sits on the table. Now, if you put a worm screw, a faceplate, those options are done because you can't adjust the wood in the orientation that you want. So I'm going to measure this with a pencil, and so it's off just a little bit. So I'm going to loosen up, take the tailstock. Okay, so I'll measure again with my pencil. So I line up with the top of the bark, or if the bark is large, you can line up with the bottom of the bark right where it meets the wood. So that looks great. So I'm going to tighten it all up. Okay. Now this tailstock is moving back. How do
What's
I,
that?
tailstock is moving back.
It loosens.
Okay. Oh, well, if I tighten.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start ratchet.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, getting out of the picture. Guess I should have figured out how this stubby worked before. But I'm excited to use this. All righty.
It's Australian. It's upside down. That's
That's right. All right.
Hey,
So,
Carlos, what kind of drive chuck do you use?
I use a 4-prong drive.
Four?
I have tried 2 prongs, and I'm not happy with the way they hold. One of the things I do is, so this is how it looks on the inside. I made sure to put a deep enough hole that the teeth on the drive already touching the wood. Now, if you want a little more, you could always put the spur drive on there, hit it with a mallet, and get a little more depth, but I haven't really had any problem. But I do check the tightness all the time as I'm turning. It's a safety thing that everybody should be doing. All right. Okay. So normally when I turn, I use a face shield all the time, even if I'm doing pens, whatever small, it's just one of the habits. But I'm going to use the glasses so that I can talk and work and all that good stuff. Now on my grind, I use Ellsworth's system of grinding with the swept-back wings and all that good stuff. Now, in cutting the bottom, there's different methods to get to it. So a lot of people are frustrated because as they start turning, with the rough, with it not being true, the tool is just bouncing everywhere. It's, God, how do I? It's just not very fun. The biggest thing that I've learned is you have to ride the bevel. So I'm going to do 3 different methods of cutting the bottom. The first one, I'm going to load this. So the first one, I'm going to just do a push cut straight across the bottom. Now, a lot of people will, wow, that's not round. How are you going to do that? So first, I do a small cut so that there's a track that the bevel will ride on. Once you have a really good track for the bevel to ride on, it just cuts really smooth. So it's ABC. I'm sure some of you may have heard that. So you anchor the tool on the tool rest, you ride the bevel, and then you cut. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. Now on the speed, everybody turns at a different speed. The more experience you have, I find that the faster you turn, and it cuts better. And it depends on the type of lathe. So the lathe is just starting to rattle a little bit, so I'm going to back it off so it doesn't rattle. Also what I found, sometimes if it starts to rattle, if you speed it up a little bit, the rattling goes away. So there's 2 options to get the rattling. So the tool is on the tool rest. I'm going to find a nice track to ride in. So if you can see, it's almost gone all the way around. So I need to do a little bit more of a cut. I need to go into the bowl blank a little bit. Okay. So now you can see that I have a nice track that the bowl is good. I'm riding the bevel all the way around. So I'm going to cut a little bit more. This shouldn't take any strength. The tool is in my pocket, resting against my body, and so I'm going to use my body to push instead of my arms. Straight across. Nice and smooth, nice and easy. Okay. Now the other way to do it, you can do a pull cut. Now that's more bumpy, that's more, you can say violent, you can say. So you just let, on this cut, you just let the wood come to the blade. It's at about a 10 o'clock degree. You never want to open the flute completely, that's where you get the catches. And you're just pulling the tool towards you. There. So I said 3 cuts, so now this is the 3rd one. So the other one, there again, I need to get the bevel riding on a nice track. So the tool is actually in my pocket, actually against my leg. I'm going to just push the nose in a little bit just to get the bevel riding. So now the bevel's riding, I'm just going to push out a little bit. So it gets more bumpy, it means I'm getting off the bevel. I'm going to go back. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. It takes no strength at all. Riding the bevel, nice and easy. And okay, so there's 3 different cuts to get to the bottom to the rounding. Now you have a couple of choices. One, we can finish cutting the whole thing, or we can measure where the tendon is going to go. It's really your choice. I like to measure where the tendon is. This way I know how far to go. This particular piece, I don't see any cracks, no chips, so I'm going to use this starting point as the tendon. I'm just going to cut in and do that. Okay, so we're going to use a Nova chuck. And so at the closed position, it's about 1 3/4 inches. Okay, so that's where my tendon is going to go. I always double check. So I need to cut just outside of the line. So there again, there's two options. I can come in and just do a full cut. Just push right in. Or I can just push. So I'm riding the bevel. I'm just going to push straight in. Yeah. Nice little tenon. Now, if I was using my, let's see, let's check that. So the chucks that have a little different shape, I've actually cut this tool so it fits the bevel just perfectly for the chuck. This is the only thing I use for that. That's why I know that the bevel's going to fit every time. And anytime you move your tool rest, always spin the piece by hand because you don't want to damage it, especially if you're getting close to your last final cuts. It's really disheartening to get a catch on your tool rest. So now we're going to go ahead and do the rest of the outside of the bowl. Everybody still there? Did I lose anybody? Not drinking too much wine. All right. Okay. So as it gets close to the wings, we have a couple of choices. We can look at the bark and say, do we want to cut it from the opposite direction? So the bark, we're pushing against it, so it's less likely that it's going to pop off when we get to the top. This bark's actually looking really good. I'm going to do a couple more cuts in this direction, and then I'm going to switch it up. There again, riding the bevel the whole time, you get a nice track for the bevel to ride in, and it's a really nice, easy cut. It always gets a little bumpy when you get to the top because I'm coming up to that the lower part of the wing. But I'm still riding the bevel. It's okay to be a little bumpy. The tool is supported on my waist, so the bumpiness doesn't affect me. Okay, really close to the top. So we're going to cut from the other direction. Now, if you've never done a natural edge bowl, you have to realize the shadows, because I'm going to stick the tool past the tool rest, but I have to be able to see the shadow. Now, the other thing that helps the jumpiness of it is the speed. So the faster you turn, the faster the second wing comes around, and you have more wood and less air. So that's the other helpful hint, is the speed of the Okay, so I'm gonna go this direction. Normally I'd stand more that way, but since the camera's there, I'll do this.
So Carlos, why are you switching directions? What's the reason for that?
Question, Carlos.
Okay, we have a question.
Say again, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering why you're switching directions on cutting the wood. Is there a reason you went one way and now you're turning around and doing it the other way? What's the reason for that?
Because if I continue going up towards the wings, there's a chance that this bark can pop off because I'm cutting this direction. So if I turn around, I'm pushing the bark in and I have a better chance of keeping the bark on. Now in some bowls, I just cut all the way through because I think the bark is in good shape. I think this bark is in good shape, but I wanted to just show the other option of doing that. Okay, so now that I've cut a little bit, I can just finish. Turn it up a little more, check my tension. Okay. So as you can see from the shape, if I'm riding the bevel, I can just swing my body over and the wood just cuts nice and easy. Now, if I was rough turning this, now you can see I have an option of two tenons, the smaller one, the larger one. So if I dry this and I find out that it's warped quite a bit, and so I would cut the smaller one away and use the larger tenon for the new bowl in the future. The other consideration when you're making natural edge bowls is the tenon going to be part of the foot, or are you going to cut that off later? So part of the design, you have to think about that. Also, if I keep going at the trajectory that I'm at, I would cut all this wood away and all I would have is the tenon sitting there, which would be bad because the chucks won't have a place to rest. So I'm going to cut this a little bit more and then I'll stop there. And if you're happy with the shape, I would do a little bit of sanding and then turn it over and do the inside. All right. So I'm pretty happy with the shape. If I was going to do a little more, I would take some off of here. But we get the basic shape. And then let me take a little more. Okay, since it's very, very true, I'll speed it up even a little more. It must be okay. Okay, the reason I stopped is if this is going to be my final cut, and everybody should know this, always go to the grinder and sharpen your tool. Because this is when you need the best speed, the sharpest tool, because you're just going to take a little bit off and you don't want anything to mess that up. So instead of stopping and sharpening, I have another tube.
I'll help show the shape.
Right. Okay. So as you can see, the shape didn't turn out the way the same way. But that's okay though, because one of the ways you can use a bowl gouge is you can use it as a scraper along the tool rest to kind of clean it up a little bit. The hood is almost closed. And since we have different people with different experiences, as you're cutting, once you feel good about the tool rest and the presentation to the wood, you want to look at the horizon. This way you can see what the way the tool is actually cutting.
Carlos, we seem to be muting your mic might be in a bad position.
It's down. You can move it up closer to your, pull the backside around.
Okay.
Is that better?
Is that
That's
better?
better.
Okay. Should I repeat that last point? Okay.
Okay.
So basically what I was doing is you can use the bowl gouge as a scraper. Just this way you can just lightly cut it. You can always use shear cuts also. I won't demonstrate that because I'm not proficient at it. So, all right. So we have the tenon, it's the right shape, right size. The bowl is the basic shape we want, and we're ready to turn it around. Any questions so far? Knockout burn. Knockout motors. This is when we should have a commercial. Okay. Okay, this, oh, I remember. The other chuck was a Dick Mark.
Mm-hmm. Is
Senior moment.
that what you're using at home?
I use both. Yeah,
Okay.
Okay. Just one quick thing about a chuck. If you ever get the chuck semi-stuck, you always want to open it up and use a tool or something that gives you leverage. You don't want to use the key to try and unlock it, because that's when you damage the key or the mechanism. People always ask me, well, how tight is tight? I said, with oak, pretty darn tight. Now, if you're doing an inside tenon, then if it's expanding, you have to be careful what kind of wood you're using so you don't have problems. Okay. Okay. So there again, on the safety part, always make sure to spin the work by hand. Everything is locked up. Since I'm going to turn it down a little bit, just so I can turn it on. Pretty good. All right. Now, in order to use the bow gouge, it has to be way over the lathe instead of where it was, because I want to ride the bevel, and the only way to get that is to hold it way over. There. Okay, so I'm just going to present the tool to the. And once I have the bevel line, then I can move my body over. Lower the tool just a smidge. Put it up a little. Okay, so I'm going to push the tip in so I get a nice track to ride the bevel. So the bumpiness is from the lower part of the wing. It'll smooth out as soon as I get past that.
I think we lost the sound from Carlos. We're not hearing any talking.
Repeat the
Lost the
question,
video
please.
also. Okay, it's back.
Repeat the question. I guess you repeat. You got the mic.
Go ahead and repeat the question, please. Can you hear me?
We lost the video, Carlos, for a minute.
Oh, okay. Can you see it now?
Yep,
Okay.
we lost everything, sound and video.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Internet.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what you missed, but as I'm cutting, so I'm pushing into it with the tip, and I need to get the bevel on a track so it's smoother. Now it bumps until I can get all the way around to solid wood. So it's going to be bumpy, and then it's going to smooth out. Right there, twice as smooth. Ride this elm's to a straight. Okay, a little more. Yeah.
Carlos,
Yes.
how thin do you usually leave the rim when you're doing natural edge?
Oh, good question. Well, when you first do them, they're thicker, but as you make more, they get thinner and thinner. So my best bowl, you can see the light. You can see the light through it, like a lampshade. So it takes some practice. But this one we're looking at about a 1/4 inch right now. We're going to go a little thinner. But I'm glad you asked the question, because this is the time where you decide how thick the wing, how thin the wings are going to be. Okay, so you see that black line. So once the wood goes all the way around, that's when you stop and say, okay, I'm gonna thin my wings out. And then once you thin them out, you never go back up to the top of the wing. Go from the black line down, and you never come back up. And the reason you do that is, even with a small ball like this, the thinner it is, the wings actually vibrate. So if you've got the right thickness you want, because you need the solid, you need all this solid wood in order to keep the wings from vibrating. So once you get them nice and thin, if you go back, you'll have a really hard time getting get a nice finishing cut. The other thing happens if you get a larger bowl, the wings, and depending on how fast you're spinning, the wings will actually flex outward. So when you present the tool, the wings will be bouncing back and forth on the tool, and there's no way of getting a clean cut. So now is the time to determine how thin do I want. So the very top is much thinner than the bottom. So I'm going to kind of do a straight cut, straight down, and then look at it again. Okay, let's see those wings. Hey, pretty darn good. So here's another moment, a sharpening opportunity. So if you're saying, you know, maybe a little thinner, you would go to the sharpener, get a nice fresh edge, so you get a nice clean cut. So right now I see a few, you can't see, but there's a couple little tool marks, difficult to sand out, so you always want to go back and nice sharp edge and cut those out. Okay. Also, this is a fairly small bowl. It's nice and true. I'm actually going to speed it up even more. We're at about 2,000 RPM right now. Oh, what happened? I think I lost my wing. I lost my wingman. Yeah, there it is.
Well, we're recording this. I can back up. It'll still be there.
It'll still be there. All right. Okay. So that's what happens too. Right, a little thin, but that's okay. Wow. So, we just keep going. So, so let's say it wasn't such a big crack. You can glue it. There's different fixes. Let's say the bark is falling off. You can peel all the bark off, and then you get a torch and darken the edges. So from a distance, the bark looks like it's still there. It's not. But, all right. Just keep going.
What's that?
Just keep going.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, we'll just keep going.
Oh, it's funny, just a little commentary too. Sometimes, in this case, he lost the bark and also a little piece of the sapwood, so it probably wasn't a good idea. But if you just lose a piece of the bark, sometimes it's just take a time out, and you can take super glue, CA, and glue it back in, and then proceed tenderly, and you can repair it. And you can also use sometimes other, if it's a rough bark, not a smooth one like this, you can take little chunks of bark and glue them back in place. And and make up for it, and nobody knows.
Okay. So the other safety thing is, as you go deeper into the bowl, you want to keep your tool rest as close as possible, because the farther the tool sticks out from the bowl and the tool rest, there's more vibration, more shattering.
Is that a reason also to use a 1/2-inch gouge as opposed to a 3/8?
Yes. Yeah, the bigger the gouge, the better. Yep. So as I'm turning, I'm just letting the tip get a nice groove, ride the bevel, nice easy cuts. The only thing I try and do is, you can see the tool is shake a little bit. As soon as I can get it against my body, I do that for the extra support. So the vibration is from the tool because it's sticking over 2.5 inches.
So Carlos,
Yes.
yeah, so do you do any measurements to make sure you don't go through the bottom or turns into a funnel, or do you just eyeball it?
Well, I eyeballed it for years and fairly successful. But okay, so when I'm turning, no. But if I'm teaching a class, yes, we drill a hole, a pilot hole, and I tell the students, don't go past that hole. Of course, I'm generous because every so often someone doesn't listen and they go right past the hole. But yeah, it is a good idea to do pre-drill the hole. The other thing that happens when you pre-drill the hole is when you get to the center, you're not fighting the center of trying to cut that little piece out. So if in recommendation, yes, I recommend doing a pilot hole, because when you get to the center of the bowl, you don't have to worry about that little divot in the bottom. You'll have to worry about it eventually when you get to the bottom, but that we'll worry about that later.
Um,
Okay. This will be annoying.
I'm trying to get to, hang on just a sec.
Okay. The production manager said, hang on.
Okay. Just to be frankly honest, you know, as you gain more experience, you really eliminate the problem of ever making a hole in the bottom of your bowls. Never happens,
Never.
you know, so what happened? I didn't come across.
Oh, it didn't.
All right, at any rate, back to,
So how many funnels do you have, Bill?
well, I was holding one up, but somehow that camera didn't pick it up. Let's see what we can do here.
I just hold it.
Yeah, hold in front of the tailstock. You can move it over a little. There we go. That, yeah, no, actually, what really occurred in that, I was coring, frankly. And the problem came about that the coring bit couldn't quite reach to the bottom. So I had to break it out. And so that'll be another demo, is how I'm going to fix that ultimately. Cheryl, I think, has one of some similar flavor. So we may combine those into a demo.
Okay. It's kind of fat right where my fingers are, so I'm going to take a little bit more off of here. All righty. So probably a couple more cuts and probably as thick and thin as I would want it. Of course, you know, with a demo, you tend to do a little bit quicker. But so if I was at home, I'd be a little bit differently. But we'll do a couple more cuts. Now, one of the techniques I use to help with the vibration is if you have a long enough tool handle, I have the tool against my arm. So as I come around and the vibration, I have a little bit more support on it until it reaches my body, and then I have both my arm and my body pulled. Okay. Well, I think in lieu of going a little bit thinner, I think we'll just, you don't want to see me sand, I know it's boring. So we'll go ahead and turn around and use a jam chuck, and we'll go from there. Good. Okay, I brought a couple different, I have a box of these because depending on the size, make it to fit just right. So this started a lot larger, fit the bowl just right. Okay. So the goal behind the jam chuck is to get as much space all the way around, because you don't want to just hit the edges, or you don't want to have it hit the outside edges, because then it could break as you push the bowl into the chuck. So I'm going to take a little bit off of the jam chuck, and then we have this little piece, this, I don't know what it's called, but you use it for
Shelf liner or something.
shelf liner. Yep. So that works really well. Buy a sheet of it, and it just works really good. Okay. So make this a little smaller. I also want to take the corners off, because I don't want anything, if it does loosen up, I don't want the corners to burn the inside. Yeah, caught the tool. Okay, so the draft fit. Okay, it's good. Okay, so we have our little pad. We have a jam chuck turned to the right size. We have a bowl. Should fit pretty snug, and it does. I can't turn the bowl and the chuck, which is pretty good. Okay, so it's right there. Turn it down. Yeah, that's pretty true. What's going on? Okay, so I slowly tighten it up. Part of what I'm doing is I'm watching it push in. Also, I'm hearing for any wood to wood or wood, cracking or splitting and making any funny noises. Okay. Now the next thing is you have your live center. You can buy a set of them which have different points on them. Some with no points, some with really narrow points, so it helps you get in closer. So depending on what you have, you get this as close as you possibly can in turn. Okay. So there I have two options of turning. I can just push it and cut it, but the problem you have is you're putting a lot of pressure on the bowl moving it. And so the best way is you just push the tool into the tenon. So you start off slow.
So you're pushing toward the headstock?
Yes, I'm pushing towards the headstock. It just gives it more support. I'm doing the same. I'm just riding the bevel, nice easy cuts. Yeah. So the next thing we have to consider is it's going to sit on the outside edge. So that means this is going to need a slightly concave bottom. And so I can continue to do this with the bowl gouge. So get the spec. Okay. So that's a pretty good cut, but still rough around the edges. Let me do a little more. Okay. So there's still too much wood to chisel off, so you need a little bit more to take it off. I need to sign off for a second. I need to grab a tool that I didn't think I'd need, but I'm glad I brought.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. So this is a 1/4 inch detail spindle gouge. Works really good. Here again, you got to ride the bevel, so nice clean cut. This feels really good right now. If you could feel it, you're at about 220 to sand, maybe even better. So I'm just riding the bevel. I'm just going to go in and start cutting. Now, depending on your experience level, some people just say, hey, I'm just going to cut it off with the saw, do some chiseling and sanding. But over time, you say, no, I'm going to just keep cutting. Now, if your jam chuck is in good shape, you should, should be able to cut it all the way off without it flying off. Spinning really fast. fact, as I get closer, I will even slow it down more. Let me check the concave. Yes, we're there. This sure is different than doing it live, you know, with an audience screaming and throwing stuff at you. I like this better. We're getting close. I give up the ghost.
Is that tool ground any different than your normal ones?
No.
No.
No, it's just regular. All right, there it is. Man,
Yeah.
falls right off.
All right.
So now you just have a little bit to sand. I wouldn't even, well, maybe with a very sharp chisel. There you have it. Okay, questions, answers?
So, yeah, Carlos, what do you usually finish your bowls with?
A variety. I've tried a lot of stuff. A bowl like this, I would, well, one of the things I do is I will do Yorkshire grit. So I'll sand a 600 to 800, do Yorkshire grit on it, put a sanding sealer, and then sometimes I just buff it with the all buffing system at that point. I'll use Mahoney oil quite a bit. That'd be the fourth thing. So Mahoney oil, and then I buff it out. But I took Bill's lead. He mentioned that he buffs everything. And I go, okay. But yeah, but if you have a really nice sanding, you know, you do Yorkshire grit, sanding sealer, the Mahoney oil. By the time you get to the buffing, there's a really nice sheen to it. So that's pretty much what I've used wipe on poly. I've used all kinds of stuff. That's for the new members, even the old ones. So on the empty bowls, if you ever want to learn which finish you like, turn a bunch of empty bowls, and those are your practice bowls to see what kind of finish you want. And that's what I've done in casts. You know, you make 30, 40 bowls, and that's 30 or 40 different finishes, whether it's a stain, whether it's a lacquer, whether it's milk paint. Any of those things are great to practice with. But you need the bowls to practice with. So, hey. No questions?
So, any other questions from anybody? All right.
I have one question, Carlos.
Okay.
When you get down to the very end of taking that foot off, you kept using the detail, spindle detail gouge. Could
Yes.
you use a skew and just slice that thing?
You can. I haven't perfected my skew skills, but yes, if Dave was here, he'd say, "Oh yeah, I use a skew." So, yes.
I use a carving knife to do that last bit. It's thinner than a skew.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the big thing is you need a good jam chuck, so when it does finally come off, it's still holding it in place.
Doesn't fly off.
It doesn't fly off. Well, and we're not spinning very fast. I was probably spinning, I don't know, 400 towards the end. And then even, you guys couldn't see me, but my left hand was actually turning it down some. It's just a safety thing. Right.
Carl, when you, Carlos, when you talked about a stuck chuck back there a while ago,
Yes.
did you say something about using the tool, not using the tool to unstick it because you wore it out, or what was the thought on that?
Not to use your key.
Well, actually, I wanted to suggest that I talked to, what was it, Ken, or I can't think of his name now, Kevin, of One Way, and he said the tool is made for that, for One Way. The tool is made to actually use as a lever.
No, that's what
In
yeah,
that
that's what I'm
particular
saying.
case.
Yeah, you don't use the key, you open it up and you use the tool.
Not the key, no, we're talking about the One Way, the heavy-duty One Way tool, which is different than the key you're using there.
Right, yeah, but whatever tool you want to use a turning tool to unlock it. Yes.
Okay. All right, fine. Thank you. What was your strategy on repairing the wing or dealing with the wing that was gone?
Strategy for the thickness of the wing?
No, dealing with the fact that it came off.
Ah, okay. Well, it's a large enough piece. I'm hoping to be able to find it on the floor and glue it.
Good.
I would, if not, I would chalk this piece as up to experience.
Well, you could make a small bowl out of it, of course.
Yes, yeah, you could just cut the rest of the wings off and make a small bowl.
Well, the other thing too is you can just strip the bark off and let everybody know that's what you wanted to do.
That's great. It's still a natural edge.
Yeah.
With some woods,
Bill is very good at making a feature out of a mistake. He told me that a long time ago. It's a very good thought.
it's the measure of a true artisan in wood is to learn how to deal with your mistakes, or not necessarily a mistake, but flaws in the wood, as well as many other things. But there's some of the barks you cannot hold on there. I'm sorry, they won't work. And so you can still do a natural edge bowl. It's very nice. You just deliberately strip the bark to begin with. And then just let it follow, let the grain follow around the edge of the cambium layer.
Yeah. I like the idea of actually using a torch and darkening that wood to make it look like bark. I think that's a really neat idea.
A Sharpie.
Hey, Carlos, that's your first empty bowl.
Well, I need to fix it, but yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Carlos, great demo. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, Carlos, that was great. That was our first live demonstration with actually turning live, which was kind of a new experience here. So I guess that kind of wraps up what you're doing, Carlos? All done? If there's no more questions?
Just another comment, Steve.
Yeah.
I really liked what you did in the beginning. I don't think we've had, maybe a long time ago, how to look at a log and see the bowls in it. I liked your presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was nice.
Alrighty.
That was
Now,
excellent.
if you like, I can give this PowerPoint to our fantastic webmaster, and he can take the pictures off.
Well, that brings up another point. I believe the write-up you've done on your earlier description of turning a natural has been put on our web page by Ed. So if anybody wants to see a little of your previous write-up on how to turn a natural edge bowl, you should be able to get that off the web page. And hopefully we'll have this little recording up on our web page in the next couple of days, if all goes as planned.
One more quick question, if I may. Carlos, how did you said you need to look at your wood carefully to make sure that, or to try to get a figurine in the bottom of your bowl that was very attractive. Now, how did you, if you have Superman vision, how did you look through the wood and find that?
Well, the darkness in the picture that we showed, that's the heartwood. And so that's the center of the tree. And so that's where you have to really cut. You know, you want to cut the pith out, but you want to be, if you cut too much of it out, you won't have it.
Right.
That's my experience, that, you know, a little bit of the pith, because you're going to cut a lot of this out
Yes.
to get the tannin and to shape the bowl. So in these smaller bowls, if there's a little bit of pith in there and it's green wood, you're going to get rid of it pretty quick.
All right. Thank you.
I have found on Natural Edge that if you once turn them, they don't crack.
I couldn't hear you. Say,
Natural Edge is a really good design to do once turning. They
I'm
don't.
having a volume problem on this end, I'm afraid.
I was going to say too, Bill, that's a really nice remote demo setup. I know you went to a lot of trouble and expense to put that together.
Yeah, I'll second that. It was good camera work. That really helped with the different camera views.
Yeah. Well, and it really helps myself because I don't have
I
to.
agree with that, but I also know that it's part of Bill's neuroses.
So, in other words, it's only going to get better with this camera work over time, huh?
So
It was pretty good today.
Heartwood.
Yeah, here's something that took a while to learn. Most of the time, your pith, can everybody see that okay? The pith.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people wanting to make the biggest bowl typically would say, all right, well, I'll cut across right here and have two big bowls. Now, the problem with that is this pith man is going to be off center in both. And so resist that temptation and look and say, how would I get it centered? And the answer is you're going to get it centered by making your cut here. And now this heartwood in here is going to be centered in the bowl. This is going to be a smaller bowl over here, maybe so small you don't even use it, but you'll have the centered heartwood. And it was a friend of a friend who was a pro selling for years. That's how he made his living. He said it took him a long time to realize this. And when he started selling natural edge bowls and bowls in general with a centered pith, heartwood that was showing as being centered, his sales doubled. People didn't know the difference, they just knew that they liked it more.
Thank you, Bill.
Tell?
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Hey, guys, I wasn't involved in the early